Welcome in, everybody, to our Scarves and Spikes SuperDraft preview show. I'm joined by a motley crew that we have never had on the show all together in any shape, form, or fashion. But it's a good group of folks that know a ton about college soccer in North America. Basically, everybody here in this room right now, besides me, you should be following to get all the details about college soccer as it pertains to MLS, the pipeline, everything else. So just to kind of go around the room real quick, we have Mark Helkenberg here from College Soccer Match Day, host of one of the best sources of college soccer information that you can get. A gentleman who doesn't need in this realm an introduction, but I will do it anyway. Jason Longshore from Soccer Down Here and 92.9 The Game. And then our very own Gray Gowder from Scarves and Spikes, who if you haven't checked it out yet, wrote a very, very good piece going over a lot of the potential for Atlanta United here in the Super Draft, which is coming up this week. Guys, how are y'all doing, first of all? Because this is a busy time of year.
Ready to get the season started again. Let's go. We got about a month, right? For
Getting
preseason.
close. Gray, Mark, how y'all doing?
Things
know
are
Gray-
going
I know
well. I
Gray, you're
mean,
getting
it's I always love the draft time of year because it's properly timed with Christmas coming up.
Absolutely. And just at the end of the year here, excited for new beginnings and to have a little bit of optimism about Atlanta United again, which is something that we haven't had in a few years. So excited about that.
All right, I'm gonna dive right into it with everybody. And I guess to kind of start off, and we talked about it beforehand, but we're kind of going around the room a little bit, but jump in, have fun. If you got something to say, by all means, dive in. This is not super formal, but I guess Mark, because out of all the people here, I've talked with you the least, so I'll start off by putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Just kind of give us the overall state of college soccer in the U.S. as it stands right here, December 15th, 2025.
I mean, there's so much to cover for that, but I would
That's a
say
loaded question.
maybe one of the kind of interviews, I think they did it a few years ago with Orlando City's technical staff. I think they described it perfectly, that it's such a huge player pool that is full of, like, you don't need to pay any money besides the salary. So it's one of the best available player pools to help form a roster. And then we've seen it with so many teams out there that there's so many benefits you can get, all the way from developing a player who could either be U.S. domestic or an international player that has found their way into the pool that you can sell on for large sums of money. And then also, I think one of the themes that determines if it's a successful draft is if you can start to take players from kind of this amateur pool and make first team caliber players out of them. And there's so many different benefits to that as well. Typically lower salaries, so it helps balance the salary caps. And you can get like 10-year players out of the draft if you do it right. So it's hugely beneficial. I think a lot of clubs are, if they haven't been too invested in the draft, they're starting to get a little bit more familiar, just seeing all the other teams and the success that they've had in different ways. So yeah, I mean, I'm huge on it. I know a lot. I've gotten to know so many different college players over the years that it's a phenomenal group of young men. And I mean, they've come in, or a lot of them have come in to be assets, especially now that there's the second team associated with it as well.
I feel like the level has really improved a lot over the past few years too. And I mean, maybe this is a little bit just from what I see around this area. I had this past year at D1, I called Georgia State, I called Mercer, I saw Georgia Southern multiple times. And I feel like the level for all of those teams and the teams that would come in the Sun Belt and the SoCon is higher than I have ever seen. I really feel like with the international players that are coming in, they're at a higher standard. And then the domestic players as well are either many times coming out of MLS academies. So they're even a very good level straight out of the gate, or they're some of the best players in regions that aren't served by MLS academies. So I feel like it's been a perfect storm for college soccer, where you're in a portion of time right now where you have more professional teams than ever before. Many of them have a second team where a player can develop and be given a little bit of patience, and the overall player pool is larger than it's ever been. So it's a really good time for the game. I've enjoyed the College Cup. I've enjoyed seeing the performances in this tournament, and I think you're going to see a lot of these players that go on and have really good professional careers.
And I'd say along those lines too, people have been talking about the demise of college soccer for years now, and I think the infusion of international talent, but also the creation of NIL opportunities for some of these players, has fundamentally changed the competitive landscape as far as recruitment. And so, looking at some of these guys who could opt between an MLS Next Pro deal, or potentially go and develop at one of these top tier college programs and potentially enhance their value, whether that's towards a homegrown deal or looking abroad or at the USL Championship. I think the agency for the players seems to be increasing a little bit. And Mark, I'm curious about your perspective on that, because a lot of these guys, you see kind of the behind the scenes a lot more on it. But do you feel like most of the guys you're working with have a little bit more options than they would have 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, and I think especially with the growth of USL and obviously all the second teams out there for MLS, that's always the thing with all the changes that they want to make with the college game, with the new calendar and even some of the rumored like partnerships and things. I think some of the ideas are really great, but ultimately it comes down to there's only so many professional spots. So the more teams, the better, and that'll create more of or broaden the pathway, and ultimately potentially help the U.S. national team player pool with some of the late bloomers. I will still say that it's very difficult for a lot of these guys because it is so competitive to find spots, because there's only going to be a certain amount of teams that need a player at a particular position. So I always tell, most of the guys, it's like, if you're not potentially a top 20 type level player, then you should probably be going out on tryouts and trials and stuff just to get out there. And I even think that we'll start to see, every year when these clubs are holding different tryouts and things, that some guys that are good freshmen, sophomores, like for the USL realm, they might start showing up to some tryouts ahead of time, even if they intend on fulfilling their full 4 years, just to kind of get let staffs get familiar with who they are and their ability. And because again, it is so competitive that you can't just wait around and hope that your name gets picked, because who knows?
So that kind of ties into the next question. And Mark, I'll jump back to you for this one, and we can kind of go around. For somebody who doesn't pay attention to the SuperDraft and doesn't pay attention to the college soccer pipeline, because it can get very convoluted. And to be fair, I think even people who follow MLS or Next Pro, they probably skip over the SuperDraft until they find out, oh, hey, my team is signing whatever player, a Duncan McGuire, or, whoever the case may be. Name a success story from the past few years. But for somebody who doesn't quite know what the SuperDraft is and kind of the nuances and how, there is a player pool of almost 500 players that could be available in these different situations, can you just kind of give the Cliff's Notes version of how the SuperDraft works and how these players kind of could potentially be available?
Yeah, so that list of roughly 500 names that you're referring to, basically, it's funny because I think everyone is a little bit more in the U.S. at least. Everybody is, when they think draft, they think NFL draft, and they've probably heard the term like, "Oh, declare for the draft." So like, "Oh, is he declaring?" That's not how it works in MLS, or else you'd have thousands of players all being like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go pro. I declare for the draft," and they'll just do it. It's not how it works. So basically, from my understanding, um, every team provides the league with a list of players that they're interested in um, drafting. So then the league will compile that list and they'll narrow it down to roughly 500, and that'll be who you can actually select from. They might get input from agents that they've had relationships with, college coaches that they have relationships with, down to even like guys that they've had come through their academy that they're just not going to sign homegrown that are now graduating, even if they have or have not played. They'll put them on the list just to make them available to like other teams, and, like looking out for their academy products. But that's like mainly how that is formed, and then you get a small group of now freshmen. It used to be freshmen and sophomores that are offered a Generation Adidas contract from the league. That implies that at least one team is interested in signing you. So you'll be in the draft. It's guaranteed. It won't count against the cap. And those are usually pretty attractive players for certain teams because, I mean, we see it every year. They tend to go pretty high. I don't know what else.
No, that's good.
If I'm missing
like
anything
from,
there, but the other guys can jump in.
I
yeah, no,
think
that's
the thing about the draft that's so interesting in MLS compared to maybe other drafts you might follow in other leagues is it's almost like a futures kind of thing where, and you guys talked about it in the article, like you can draft somebody knowing that they might not quite be ready, but you can grab their rights and they can go back to school and see what happens. That adds a wrinkle in strategy. Like, I mean, I'm trying to put myself in the place of a GM or a chief soccer officer, and I think when you're in the middle of the first round or lower, you start to think about, all right, is there somebody who can help me now in a position I need? Maybe not. Is there somebody who in a year's time might be something I need? Yeah, let me go get that guy. So you get into the situation of, do you take a pick for now? Do you take a pick for later? Or do you trade a pick? And it's just such an interesting discussion seeing what teams are going to do depending on where they are in the draft. I'm totally with you on Generation Adidas guys. I think, we've seen that work in Atlanta with a Miles Robinson. We saw it not work with an Eric Centeno. It's never a guarantee, but more often than not, Generation Adidas guys become some level of contributor for you because you're talking about guys that are projected very highly. They're incentivized to come out early with a little bit more on a salary side of things, but they don't count against you. So it's really beneficial when those hit. I do wonder over time if we start to see that, and I think we are maybe starting to see it decrease a bit in terms of how many in each draft class, but there's
Yeah.
at least a couple who are going to do it.
I'll say, building on to one of your points of like drafting for the future, I think this year, especially with the induction of the sophomores, I mean, some of the top names this year in college soccer had all previously been drafted. So Sergio Solans Ormo, Donovan Phillip, Palmer Alt, like 2 years ago, Marcus Caldera. So some of like the top attacking players out there were exactly how you said it. I mean, Donovan Phillip last year, I think only had 6 goals, but you saw the potential there. So Rapids just say, hey, third round, let's get a 6'2" center forward who already is kind of represented his national team for St. Lucia, and let's see how he does. And then of course he's ends up being one of the top goal scorers, and he's in the College Cup tonight.
And that just speaks to the diversity of different strategies and visions for what the college is for all of these different teams. So, if someone was a fan of Philadelphia Union, they aren't really paying attention this week because they trade away all of their picks. But the Rapids are the complete opposite extreme of that, where they're trying to maximize their potential, and maybe a handful of those guys make it out of training camp. But what I find interesting about Atlanta is that we've got this unique balance of being able to recruit players from abroad. We can build through what's become a very good academy, and we're looking at potentially bringing players back that are from the academy in college as well. So a few of those first round trades coincided when we were bringing back a guy like Will Riley or Garrison Tubbs, who we traded away, but we brought back quality talent who would equate to a first round draft pick in some cases. And so what I'm hoping we can do as a club is have a kind of a complementary strategy that is recognizing the limitations we have as far as how we use our international roster spots, and potentially not put these young guys who have a lot of talent in a rough situation like a Javier Armas or a Ronan Wynn last year, or I think our third pick, William Kulvik, just didn't even come to camp, is what I heard, because he didn't see a pathway to it. And he was one of the best defenders in his conference at Maryland. And so Mark's earlier point about teams like Orlando having a clear vision, not only for how they approach the draft, but how we're going to bring these players, from integrating them in immediately to, what do they look like over the next few years as they progress to a regular role. That's what I'm hoping that, this team under Tata, Chris Henderson, and had the great news about Jose Silva getting the Two's head coaching job officially. I'm hoping that development pipeline starts to materialize a little bit more.
I think it's being strategic about positions, honestly, because I look at a team like Orlando and profile wise in terms of what they're going to do with their roster build across the whole. I don't think they're going to spend on the high end, although they are starting to. I don't know if they're going to spend on the high end like an Atlanta might, but they're going to spend. They're going to spend more than a Philadelphia and some others, and they probably haven't historically produced as much out of their academy, although it's starting to get going now with a guy like Freeman, with Thomas Williams becoming an asset to them, a player that I've always rated really highly. I think where they've done really well in adding to that is in the draft. I'll give them their flowers. I think they've found guys in the draft, especially at the number 9 position, that have served them well, either, directly or become those assets for them and then stack up more. And I think that's the idea here for Atlanta, in my opinion, especially with this kind of pick at number 2, is you got to look at what do you need right now, and what kind of a role can you expect a player picked there to give you straight away. And I think you're looking at a number 9, just looking at who is available that is rated that highly. The 9s are the guys who jump out to me in terms of filling a need. And maybe the 9 is interesting because maybe not directly this year. They might end up playing a lot for the 2s this year. But when you look at next year and you look at what could be available at that number 9 position behind Latte Lot, maybe that's when that player becomes crucial for you. I think fullback's another one that is a spot where you have needs right now in depth there. And I think that's a position that I see at the college game level translating really well. I think fullback is a spot, and we've seen both traditional fullbacks and also converted guys. Now, I look at Brandon Bye as a prime example of that. Bye is such a great success story from the draft, and an attacker from Western Michigan who becomes a top tier fullback in this league, in my opinion. He's somebody that I kind of would have liked to have seen come to Atlanta in this offseason, but I digress. I think those are positions that I jump to and I look at. I think holding midfield can be another, but I feel like you're in a really good spot there right now, roster wise. So I don't know if that's necessarily as big of a need for Atlanta, but the 9 is what I keep coming back to because of that number 2 pick. If you stay number 2, you don't trade down or you don't trade it away. I feel like you're looking at one of the 9s that are available in that spot, and maybe 1 year 2s and then second year here in Atlanta, you want them on your first team roster as your primary backup.
I know we're going to talk about specific names. I have to throw out Nicholas Simmons. I have to throw that name out there because number 9, I mean, he is a number 9, and he is probably the type of number 9 that you want in Atlanta, right? Like profile, build, speed, technical ability, very well rounded. Anyway, I'm not going to get off on the
Well,
tangent about speed.
I'll share something with you guys that getting the chance to talk to Ronnie Dyla a good bit last year. One of the things that he wanted, either for this season, or he wanted it, I think, in the second half of the season, he was hoping that they could find him one, was just a big target number 9.
Yeah.
A different kind of number 9 than what you have. I mean, Jamal TRA is a big dude, but he doesn't play as much like a big target 9. I think you might have some of those in this draft, and I think you might be able to get somebody who is a different kind of player that can either complement if you need them together, or be an alternative at times in games to a Latte Lot. And I feel like that might be the spot that is where it really works out that you have such a high pick, and there's guys available who could fit that bill.
You mentioned fullbacks as well. Thankfully, Atlanta has a pretty good track record of developing fullbacks in their
You do.
history. So, even if that is a pick that you go with, I think you can kind of go back to like Mark and Gray's point as well. That development pipeline is still going to be there, because they're not going to come out of the super draft or whatever and slot in as a starter day one. You don't expect that.
It's
You shouldn't
rare.
expect that. It's
Yeah.
very rare, but you get them with the right group of guys, the right coaching staff. We talked about Jose Silva. That's huge for me. Like, that is, I put it on Twitter earlier, but like, to me, that is the most no-brainer decision that Atlanta United could have made in this offseason. And I just think he's got the right group around him. And I think these players that play in this pipeline have the right group of coaching staff available for them.
Yeah, one thing before we jump into some of the specifics that I wanted to say, specifically around the twos, I think some of these later draft picks, they might not end up being guys who get to the first team level. And, we talked about Javier Armas and Ronan Wynn specifically. Love their games. And I think Javi is just just a great guy, a great leader in that locker room, and a very technical player, just super technical. My concern was always his athleticism at the first team level. And I think you started to see that become an issue the later in his time in Atlanta. And I think, preseason games are a tougher judge at times of if somebody is first team or not. Over a run of time, I worried about him athletically. And I think it even bore out a little bit at the next pro level. I'll be curious to see what happens with him next, because, and this is the thing that I always try to get to, covering all the stuff that we cover. You do get to know these guys a little bit, and you root for these guys that you do get to know and you see and develop. Javi's a guy that I'll root for as long as he plays. I think he's going to end up being a great coach if he wants to go down that road at some point too. But Javi will be a pro. Ronan will be a pro. These are guys who are going to be professional level players, but it might not be at the MLS level. It might not be at the first team level in Atlanta specifically. Maybe it's a different club. But having guys like that you do bring out of the draft that maybe don't make it to your first team, they become really important in developing the academy guys around them with the second team. Developing, if it's the first team guys who come down to play for the second team, they create that base of stability with the second team that you have to have a few of those guys. You don't want a team of guys who you don't see as first team guys in your second team. That Barcelona went through that for a while, and it blocked a lot of young talent from getting minutes that they needed because you wanted to keep guys around, but you didn't see them as first team guys. But you need one or two. You need those guys who can be leaders in the group and understand their role. And when you look at the back end of the draft, there might be somebody that is a long shot MLS level, but a high character guy that makes your club better. And I think that could be a valuable pick late.
Gray, Mark, y'all want to hit on anything there before we jump into Atlanta specific for a minute? We're going to jump around, to be fair.
Yeah. I think especially with maybe the showcase is a good example of that, but like for making sure you have guys with strong character, I think that's something that a lot of teams are really starting to, if they haven't already, been checking in on. Obviously, there's a big interview portion of the showcase, but obviously there's only 44 guys there. So for all the ones that aren't, like, they're getting character references from the coaches. A lot of the agents will be talking to, and they'll even talk to the players leading up to the draft to just get a better idea of who they are as a person and what makes them tick. Um, I, I do think just in talking to some players, luckily within this player pool, I don't think there's too many guys that are unbearable egotists. So, I mean, for the most part, you're getting guys that do want maybe more so, and what you'd find is maybe the level of work ethic. So that's a big part of it too. Like if you have a guy who is going to show up every day and set a good standard on the level of training and how much they care about it, that helps out a lot of these teenagers as well. But again, that comes into you did again, some teams don't really care about what they need, but I think that success comes from opportunity. So for those later round picks, it's like, well, if you are kind of short on a particular position, you should probably go with maybe the best available, or maybe somebody like Jason said, who might be the captain of their college team, who's not going to be at all an issue in the locker room. He's only going to be an asset that can just sink or swim in the second team. And if they do well, then great, you got a surprise in the draft. And if not, at least you got a good person around who is capable of getting second team minutes. But, I do think the draft is more of a carousel year to year. You see it with the Rapids, obviously, since they have like crazy amount of picks every year. Even if they're on the fence about a guy, it's like, well, we'll release them. Time for the next crop of players to come through, and we'll see how they do.
So with that, I guess this is going to be for all of y'all. I guess I'll start with you, Jason, and then because it is Atlanta specific, and Gray, Mark, y'all jump in. But over on SDH, y'all are covering. It seems like every fathomable college game in the state of Georgia is what it feels like at times.
At times it does feel that way, yes.
So I guess this is more specifically about the players from and around the Atlanta area, but it also ties into just kind of the game in Georgia as well.
Mhm.
But are there any names that have popped up to you over the past year that kind of stick out to you that are playing in college? And again, that could be throughout the country from Atlanta or just playing here in the Atlanta area.
The one that probably has the one will be picked first out of the current group is Ricky Lewis at Georgia Southern. I'm really curious to see where he's rated, and I saw him twice this year. I saw him play Georgia State in Atlanta, and I saw him in Macon against Mercer. And he's raw to me. I don't think he's ready to play a lot of minutes straight away at the MLS level. I want to see him in maybe a little bit more demanding tactical setup, because that was a little hard to gauge from what I saw. He's athletic, he's explosive, super explosive. Like he takes space so fast. He had a great goal in Macon. But I want to see movement off the ball. I want to see, defending high up the field. I want to see those kinds of elements of what he'll be asked to do. I also want to see how people see him position wise, because I'm not sure if he's exactly a 9. I think he might be more of a wide player who can play a 9, but can also play wide. I don't know if he plays wide, if he's a winger, is going to give you a lot of crosses or not. Like, I don't know exactly where he projects. I feel like some teams could see him, and I think, Mark, it might have been one of the mock drafts that you did. I think he was picked 6, if I'm not mistaken. I could see him picked there. I could see him into the middle of the first round, depending on how teams see him. And that's probably how a lot of these picks go in this kind of a draft, where you have so many different possibilities for what you do. The other teams that I saw, again, Georgia State, Mercer, Georgia Southern were the 3 D1s that I saw the most of. Furman as well, a little bit in their playoff run. I'm trying to think of who else would really jump out to me. You've got a couple of really good players at Georgia State that might be worth a flyer later in the draft. I look at a Tom Williams, an English midfielder. The international player spot is going to be a little bit of a challenge for him. but a crafty center mid, can be a 6 or an 8. I look at Virgil Dallagnaw, French midfielder who came into the program. I thought was one of the best players for Georgia State this past season. For Mercer, Tommy Red, we talk about character guys and guys that can give you a lot of things that might be geared more towards your second team and might be more of a hope that they can bounce up a level when they get to the next level. Tommy Red's a guy that is one of the scrappiest defenders that I saw over the past few years in Macon. He feel like he can play fullback, he can play center back, he could play a center back in a 3, he could play all over the back line for you. He could probably play as a 6 if you needed it. Just a fighter. And I thought he handled, when I saw Mercer against Georgia Southern with a guy like Lewis, against UNCG with some of the great talent that they have, he held his own. He can play against top guys. And I think that's where this draft, compared to how other drafts work in other leagues, gets really, really interesting, because a lot of times the 4 of us can sit here and watch a game, watch a group of players, and we're all going to have different opinions about which guys we like and how they fit into our team, let alone how they're going to fit into 29 other teams. So a lot of it is about the opportunity that these guys get and who you get a chance to see the most of. A guy like Red probably isn't going to be on many people's lists, but he might be on an Atlanta list. He might be on a Charlotte list. He might be on an Orlando list of teams that have looked across the Southeast a little bit more. So I think Lewis is the one that'll go the highest. And I'm really interested to see where he goes. The underclassmen are the other side of things that get interesting with it. You had Henry Hampshaw, goalkeeper at Mercer, who was a top guy in the SoCon. I'm not sure if he's on the list or not. He's a guy that I can definitely see play at the next level. No question for me out of what I've seen from him. Is he ready for that now? I think he could probably use another year. It's going to be fascinating, and that's why the draft feels so unknown coming into it, because of all of these variables that are hard to judge team to team what they're looking for.
Another one of those guys who's from Georgia that I'm interested in is Jalen Yearwood from North Florida. He's a really athletic, kind of lanky right back that loves to get up the field behind defenses, presents himself really well for balls over the top, and found himself one-on-one with the goalkeeper way more than you'd expect to see. It's almost like having a center forward playing right back, where he just, gets into that zone a lot. And so I didn't get to see enough of his defensive reps just to see how he would do on that end. But if you've got someone like that who you can take a flyer on for a year with the twos, and then see whether or not, bringing Remy Okunlola back, who's a fantastic prospect, would move him out, or if there's room for both of those guys. I think.
I'll put my hand up on one more guy like that, Braden Dunham, because what he did with what he did with the academy, then what he did with the twos, then what he did at Furman. If you signed him tomorrow, I'd be ecstatic. He is a guy that is going to be a must, in my opinion. Here,
his growth curve,
has
been vertical. It's wild.
I know. It's so funny because I remember he was on that U16 team that won the national title, and I interviewed him that fall. It was the first interview that he had ever done, and he was so nervous. It was such a funny, just whole conversation with him, and then getting to know his coaches and talking to them a little bit more, and how he has blossomed from being one of the quietest people in the group, going up an age group, and I think really struggling for a minute. He was a captain in the 16s, and then when he went up the next year, he was one of the younger guys in a group, and he really struggled. He had kind of been passed over by a lot of players. Dominic Chonqui passed him, other guys passed him. And then it all hit for him. Everything started to connect. I think he grew a little bit, got a little bit bigger. His confidence shot up, which is great. He's got a giant personality now. He's got a mean streak on him, which I like on the field. He's the goal that he scored in the quarterfinals nationally. I mean, the player, like, again, and we've seen him play as a left back, right back, center back in a 3. We saw him play as a 6 in MLS Next Pro. He can play anywhere across that. If you wanted to sign him tomorrow, I would be ready to go buy the jersey. He's like, I'm ready to support him. And he's one that I think is going to be that, along with Remy, another one at fullback that, you know, you look at whatever it is about Atlanta United and fullbacks, they keep creating them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, between those two guys, Dom Chong Kui and, some of the other guys who are further down the system, I think we've got a really interesting pipeline at left back and a little bit at right back. And just another option at right back that I like just for his leadership value is Will Cleary from Stanford. I think he's a really interesting guy who has played in the Stanford midfield, but also has played as a fullback as well, wide midfielder, and was a teammate of Will Riley's while they were there together, and a guy who seems to be, high IQ, high character player with a lot of physicality on that flank. Who I don't know if he's going to make it in the MLS side of things, but I think he would be a great mentor kind of presence for the young guys that we've got coming up through the system. So those are a couple of guys that I'm interested in on the defensive side, kind of later in the draft in that second and third round. NC State's Tag Healy is also just so much fun to watch play, and he's a smaller guy. I'm not sure if he necessarily translates the way some of the other smaller 10s have succeeded in MLS, but I could see him doing extremely well in a USL setting. Just, big personality, big energy, seems to be a really positive presence for his NC State team, and I think he would play really well alongside Santiago Pita in that sort of 3-4-2-1 kind of. I'm really interested in at least looking in the first round is whether or not we can sneak in and get another pick from Orlando, since they've got 3 in that first round, and see if we can repeat Tata's first draft again and go for 2 and 9 for a second time around. So I think we look at attacking at the beginning. Ransford John is just such an interesting player for me. He's just this very strong and compact player who feels like if Joseph Martinez was playing as an attacking midfielder. And I kind of wonder what he could do if, in Tata's system, if he's given a chance to develop. And then, Tyler already mentioned Nicholas Simmons, who we really like here at Scarves and Spikes. Nikola Markovic is somebody who I think is a really interesting center back. I think he's potentially ready to slot in right behind whatever our center back group is that we start the year with. And, if Nigel Prince doesn't come back, as a lot of us thought he would for a while, we're going to need that guy who can be a bridge between the first team and Caden Moore, who's not quite ready for that jump despite becoming a homegrown. And, if we could get Markovic and Dunham back this year, that's a really good back end for this center back group.
Yeah, Prince is one
So
that
those are some
I
of my
thought
guys
for a
I'm
long
watching.
time. I thought Prince was going to come back, and it seems like it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was
Which is a shame.
kinda
I mean,
thinking.
he and Justin McLean, another local guy. I mean, Jason, you
Yeah.
saw him for years with
Yeah.
or in Atlanta, and Cristiano Bruletti is another one of those really talented guys with it, in Indiana, and got a handful of others out there that had potential, but it seems like the club's just going a different direction and giving them a chance to find a different home.
I like Bruletti. I feel like he's probably just under an MLS level kind of guy. Athletically is the element for him. I think he's physical enough, but I don't think he can quite have the engine you need in that midfield. McLean, it's such a talented player. Injuries just always kept slowing him down at Georgia State. I think what I always liked about him was his creativity. He didn't always play the obvious pass or the obvious decision, and he usually made things come off. I'm really happy for him going up to NC State and getting an opportunity to play for a national title. It's so cool to see because he was always a guy who worked hard in Atlanta and grinded, but just couldn't quite stay on the field consistently enough for himself, but also just couldn't quite lift that team with Georgia State past the top end of the Sun Belt, which is insane in terms of talent level. I think State's been right under it and been a scrappy thorn in people's sides, and usually pulls a big upset every year. But it's tough competing with some of that top end talent in the Sun Belt.
Mark, what you got?
I mean, Gray had a lot of good ones. I do think that Jalen Yearwood makes sense in like maybe the second or third round. I think there's a great opportunity, especially at the second pick and currently the 32nd, to get two guys that could at least feature for the first team at some point in the year, especially with, again, if there's opportunities, because I just think of this most recent draft class where Ian Pilcher, Manu Dua, Tate Johnson, Jaron Gerbey before the injury. I mean, there were some guys that jumped right into the starting lineup and had seen a lot of success, obviously, especially out west. Those three guys were in the final against each other, so you can definitely find some first team caliber guys. And I think with those first two picks, it's definitely realistic, especially depending on where like Yearwood goes. Obviously, the first pick that you guys have is going to be, the expectation should be he should be a first team caliber player. And that's where that, if you do want Markovich to come in and pretty much be right on rotation in the center or in the center back group. But there's a few other guys that I think are capable of jumping into the first team and at least, under the right coaches, like Mitch Ferguson, Nolan Miller. I have to pull up my list here, but yes, a lot of those center backs in the beginning, like Whitchurch has gotten a lot of buzz. But I guess on that note as well, speaking of him and Ricky Lewis, I think a lot will be determined on how they're performing at the showcase or how they have, because it's always been my opinion when I talk to players, because some of them don't really care whether or not they're in the showcase, but some that do, I'm like, well, sometimes like it's a trade-off. Like things could go bad for you there, like
True.
And you're right on display in front of everybody. And there's some rumblings of some players that just hadn't had good showings this year. Not saying that Ricky was one of them, but sometimes you really gotta be careful. But especially in the interview type stuff.
Yeah.
But I think also mainly for the twos, I would say there's some guys in like the neighboring states that could be interesting, either in the later rounds or in the third round or just even after the draft. And, looking back at the past 6 drafts, it's not like there's a clear trend, but they definitely do look at schools that aren't really the popular ones. Like we have guys from like UNC Wilmington, New Hampshire, before they really started to get a little bit more national recognition, Campbell, which is kind of obviously nearby North Carolina, Air Force with Tristan Traeger. But, and thinking of that, obviously, well, one that comes to mind just on fit and what you guys were talking about earlier with having a little bit bigger of a body as a 9 option. But maybe I've heard in the past like that someone was saying that the profile fits, but like a guy like Tyler Tribnall, runs all day, still have yet to see the best out of him, does anything to to win. Like whatever you want him to do, he'll do it. Like he's not kind of that egotist. But
It's been a minute since I've seen him, but yeah, that's a really good shout.
Yeah.
We didn't see. I didn't see Georgia State and South Carolina this year. That was up in Columbia. We don't do the road games. And yeah, I remember him being a guy last year that I liked and could fit that number 9 kind of different profile that you need.
Yeah, because I've even it's funny enough that I didn't realize in the past that Philip Goodrum was drafted by Atlanta, but I've heard that people make that comparison quite a bit, and he's actually a taller version.
Yeah, he's bigger.
But yeah, he'd be an interesting one to bring in. I think kind of staying in the state of South Carolina, I don't know if he'll be on the eligible players list, but one that's graduating will be Ezra White from Charleston. He's a real technical midfielder, hardworking. I think Gray will know a little bit about Ezra White, but he's one that could potentially, I don't know if he's on like the radar, if like the Union 2 or United 2 would want an additional midfielder to bring in after the draft, but he was one that I just think his ability in a pro environment could be interesting. But a lot of the other names that you guys covered they definitely seem to make sense for the Atlanta sides.
Well, one guy I know that you also like, Mark, who I think would be fantastic for the twos as a veteran in the midfield is Shuma Sasaki. I think he's just a fantastic leader. He came through New Mexico United, and I think he'd bring a really good presence, like an older, experienced player to that group if he's available as a free agent. Because we brought in a guy like that as when Daniel Russo came in from Notre Dame a few years ago, and unfortunately for him, poor guy, he had it was an ACL or something but he's one of those high character guys that a lot of us were hoping could have a real shot. I'm curious, like of guys who like the local players that you were talking about. Who are some guys that you've gotten to know pretty well who would be that good next pro trialist that might not make it in the draft, but could have a chance to add to a preseason?
Trying to think of some of the graduating guys. I mean, one that could go in the draft. I had him in my mock draft, but I really like Luciano Bakota a lot from Ohio State. I just think work rate, leadership, reads the game really well, hyper technical. I'm not sure where people will look at him in terms of maybe the athleticism side, because everyone's always like freaking out about. I mean, he's 5'6", but we've seen plenty of great players right around like the 5'8" to 5'5" range. I mean, whoever gets him is going to be impressed. I think even some of the trials that he's been on within the past week, they've been really impressed.
Maxi Morales and Lucho Acosta want words about.
Yeah, exactly. I've been saying it so much because I'm 6'5", but so it's like I'm sticking up for all the short guys out there, because I'm like, they're tough to play against, especially when they got like a good acceleration, low center of gravity. You really can't do much against them.
I've got a question on a guy. I don't know if you guys have seen much. I know he was at the showcase from Central Florida, Clarence Awador. He impressed me in the games that I saw him with UCF against Georgia State. His numbers are very good at the Sun Belt level. What's the kind of take on him going to the next level?
I mean, if this is this will be the year if he does. Well, obviously because he's graduating, but just being an 03, I do think, and I actually thought last year that he would have been drafted.
Yeah.
So he was kind of one of those guys that, if you imagine, would have been drafted, being at the top of the assist leaderboard this year, it would have like fit that group. I don't think there's there's definitely not any personality issues or anything like that with him.
Not that I could tell.
I actually know him a little bit, uh, and I just like how he plays because he can play as a 10, he can play as an inside forward or an inverted winger or a natural winger. So he's got a lot of range in that attacking group, especially ones that are those type of midfielders that can connect midfield, the deep lying midfield to the attacking three. He is, especially this year, having a true center forward in Lillian Ricole. It was actually, and that's the context sometimes I think scouts hopefully are taking into account that, 1 year to the next, there's so much turnover, there's so many additions, that there's so many great players that may not be getting all the goals and assists the way that Clarence was.
Yeah.
But what a difference, like just a couple different players that support and make the team better. And then it really starts to show who's flourishing. But yeah, that'd probably be my take. I think he should get drafted somewhere or signed at least after the draft.
Yeah.
And another one kind of like that I'd forgotten about at Georgia Southern, Kevin Pierre, another center mid who's just a smart player, good character guy from what I can tell. Like the 2 times I saw Southern, I feel like he had 2 very different kinds of games. He's one of those that probably won't go in terms of getting drafted as a 5th year at this stage, but I'd love to see him get an invite to a camp and see what you can get out of him. Gray, wasn't there another Georgia Southern player that was in the mix in your mock draft? I'm trying to remember who it was.
Maybe
Just
Noah
going
Holmstrom.
through the notebook.
Holmstrom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Holmstrom. He's one who stood out to me. I'd forgotten about him. He's an underclassman, correct?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of potential with him. I know they listed him as a midfielder. I saw him in the back. 6'2" is what they have him listed at. That felt pretty legit. Good size, good frame on him, and I liked his ability to play. I think he can do the job defensively, but he can play. The modern type of center back that you got to have at this point. He's an interesting prospect, and I don't know, like, kind of as a sophomore, like what his plans are next, but he could be one that if he's sitting there in the third, I'd be okay with taking him and having him go back to Statesboro down the road and playing another season there and see what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Sunbelt Defender of the Year too.
Yeah, he's legit. Defensively, I mean, I thought he was good. It was just watching their build up, and it was really good to see Georgia Southern this year play at the level they did. They were a good team to watch. In the past, they had been a little too vertical and not really trying to keep a lot of possession for me that I enjoy. But they found a good mix of what they do this year, and they could play, but they had good structure. I think Lee Squires has done a really good job down there, and he's one to watch for sure that I could see at a minimum playing at a second, third division level professionally, and maybe with another year of development getting into a first team level.
Gray, you got anything to add before we jump to the next thing?
Well, I do have a question for Jason here,
Yeah.
just shifting gears slightly. We're going to be able to celebrate our first NWSL draft here in a few.
Well, they do the draft though. That's what's so interesting about the strategy now. They dropped the draft entirely. So your college recruitment is like a completely different animal when we're talking NWSL, which I think really opens some very interesting doors to partnerships with universities, with nearby colleges, and look at what we've seen around here lately with Georgia really becoming a top program in the country with Kadani McAlpine, who is somebody that I think can go up a level and be a professional coach if he's interested in that kind of jump. What Georgia State does on the women's side, where they play a very international Spanish, Japanese kind of possession-based pressing vertical style. that's fascinating to see. It's really different than a lot of schools in the area. But then you even go you go down to, I mean, Mercer who was very good this year, getting to the SoCon final. Samford is historically a really good program. Chattanooga has had good years. Western Carolina is a top program. You've got a lot of really good women's soccer in the area that, because you don't have the draft side of it, you do have an incubator all surrounding you on the NWSL side. That's going to be fascinating.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I just I've seen, Justin's trying to figure out, who are some Georgia players who could come back, and just looking from
like Hannah White.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from Florida State and all the small schools and regional schools in between, and
Jordan Dudley.
Absolutely, yeah.
Jordan Dudley is the one you want. She was amazing in high school. Has been amazing for Florida State. She was a top, I think, all region point guard in basketball her senior year as well. I mean, just an incredible athlete. Obviously, Croy Bethune is who you'd love to see come back and be the face of that team. But I was just in my group chat looking, not a Georgia player specifically, but trying to figure out what Jenna Neiswanger is going to end up doing, because she hasn't played at Arsenal very much. I'm like, don't sign a long-term deal somewhere. Get ready to come to Atlanta. Let's go. It's going to be fun to see that team build and what kind of take they have. I mean, I would assume that a lot of the ideas in terms of how you want the team to play would have similarity to Atlanta United. I think you're going to want to attack. You're going to want to be attack-minded. You're going to want to lean into some of the player profiles to a point that we've seen Atlanta United go after. I think you're going to prioritize the attack and prioritize speed and quickness and individual technical ability. And I hope it all comes together to be just a really fun watch. And I think it's going to elevate what I've seen at the high school level really grow so fast. I mean, the guys' side has grown in Georgia high school a lot, but high school you don't see quite as much on the guys' side because of club being such a more critical component. I think on the girls' side, you do still see a whole lot of top players in high school, and seeing what's happening over the last 2-3 years on high school and hearing just from like academy directors. I mean, we were at West Forsyth, which is one of the best programs in the state, and that's fed mostly by UFA on the youth side. And we were talking to the athletic director at West Forsyth, and he's like, yeah, we just met with the directors at UFA, and they're like, you don't even know what's coming. You have no idea how good you're going to be in the next 3-4 years. So it's cool to see this grow and have the same conversations we're having on the men's side that we're going to see on the women's side going forward.
Yeah, I'm super excited, and not to jump from college to the NWSL stuff entirely, but like it does kind of throw a little bit of a wrench, I guess a good wrench, in the way that a club looks at this talent that's coming up. Because I mean, we've had the conversations, Jason, like about some of the, like you said, the high school talent. Strangely, the Atlanta Jamaican connection is very strong. But it almost, for those scouts for the NWSL teams, it becomes like you're essentially scouting colleges and, to a degree, high schools in a similar way that like the Atlanta United scouts would be scouting overseas in other professional clubs. And that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, especially early on, like it'll take you a minute on the academy side, but you'll start to develop your own players. It'll come through your own academy. But yeah, you're going to sign players out of high school. You're going to sign players out of college. Soleil Washington is another one. You mentioned Jamaica, who's now at Florida State as well. And she's had a great start to her run there. You're going to be able to, it feels a little more wild, wild west without a draft. And you're not really worried about the picks. And I do kind of worry over time how this looks for the NWSL. I think it can be a rich get richer kind of situation. But how the different teams will strategize and how they will almost think of it like a college recruiting kind of situation. And, are you going to see Atlanta kind of lock down the best players from Atlanta, period? Are you going to see these hybrid situations, which, look, I know somebody's probably trying to figure it out how you do it, but are you going to see these hybrid situations where you sign a player but you sign the rights or whatever, and they go to college, and you're basically their NIL. Like, are you going to see that happen as a development place for some of the women in the game? I don't know. It feels like you can kind of make it up as you go and make your own rules and figure it out. So I want to see who's going to be the most creative in sorting through it.
I want us to jump to the kind of not mock draft, but the top 3, the big board, as it were. And Jason, I know you're more locked in on like some of the more local stuff, but if you want to jump in, one last thing on the NWSL thing. This is my obligatory. I have to say this every time we talk about NWSL Atlanta. There is a player right now playing for Charleston Athletic who does also play for the Jamaican national team named Atlanta Primus or Primus. I don't really know how the last name is pronounced, but first name Atlanta, last name Primus. Vibes. Just go get her. Go make it happen. Just because.
Kind of perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Mark, Gray, I know y'all are super well prepared for this. And again, Jason, if you want to jump in, but out of all the names, because we've thrown out a lot, if you're Atlanta, top 3, who are you trying to get as the super draft hits?
Like for the first round, or?
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, might as well just go with the first round. Started off with the first round anyway.
Well, yeah, I think especially what you said just now about like the Jamaican culture around or that tie-in, Nicholas Simmons probably makes the most sense. I do think I'm just gonna go give like 5 realistic ones.
That works.
But but if they do really want that pro-ready center back, Nikola Markovic makes a lot of sense there too. In the second round, depending on who else fancies him, but Mise Yoshizawa for that like attacking midfielder. But I do think long term he's a really good 8 because I've seen him play in that role for Clemson in the past, and he can get up and down the field and he'll do the work. And he has a lot of that creative edge to him as well, which is what I think a lot of teams need in the midfield. Jalen Yearwood, as Gray said, I think that one makes sense, but also Will Cleary. Maybe a sleeper for international slot, though. He'll be playing tonight, Caleb Tommy, right back. He's rapid, South African kid. I think he's developed a lot over the past few years, and then I think there's still a lot more, especially when he gets into a pro environment, but he's got the foot speed for it, and yeah, I'm happy to see him make the final here in his last go around. But those are at least a few names.
So I think we've covered a lot of the names that I would pick, but you know those first 3 for me in the first round are Jean Simmons and Markovic. I think those 3 are really compelling. Mark, you mentioned is it Alden Price from UVA as a potential option on your mind?
Yeah. It just that depended on like how young you guys wanted to go, because he's the youngest center back prospect who's probably most prime for a long career. So that's where I had him. I actually had Luka Nicolai as a right back in the second round as well. He's been highly rated for quite a while since, I mean, he's a Mönchengladbach academy product. So yeah, that's just why I say the first 2 rounds. If Atlanta don't get 2 first team quality players out of it, it'll be seen as a failure, to be honest.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. And I had Yoshizawa, Cleary, Yearwood as 3 of my 4. I think Daniel Lugo from High Point is a forward that you could potentially allow to go back for an extra year if you really thought he needed an extra year in an environment where he thrived after transferring from UNC. In the third round, we already mentioned Tag Healy. UNC Dylan Kropp is a player that I think is really interesting, just in terms of his familiarity with Matthew Edwards. I think that only helps. And it's good to have experience on the back line with a young team. So he's a guy that I thought was really interesting there. Wahabu Musa from Clemson, I think, is also a fascinating, left wing attacking talent with a lot of room to continue growing as well. So those are some of my my guys that I'm watching.
I want to ask you guys about the mock draft that you did. One strategy question first. Do we have any sense of what DC is going to do with the first pick?
That's a great question.
I mean,
gotta be
I've heard
enough,
what the
right?
whole I've heard what the new staff that they're trying to be young, energetic, high pace, high energy. So, I personally had Ransford Guion in there.
Yeah.
I know that they have a lot of familiarity with the ACC players, with like Tubbs and Kojima, or a lot of the Wake Forest guys there, and Hakeem Karamoko as well. And I just think a lot of their issue, even though I do like some of the midfield pieces they have, you still have to have creative ability coming from the midfield. You can't just rely on the front three to figure it out. And I just think that, like, I mean, he could pull the strings underneath the front three, especially when you have like Jacob Merle there already. But I mean, they could very well go for another guy like Junior Diouf and double down on more attacking side of it. But I think just long term too, once Ransford gets familiar with the college game or the pro game coming from college, doing what he's done at such a young age and just being kind of the icon in the ACC in terms of like wow factor, I don't think they could pass him up.
Tell me about Aaron Price, the guy you have in the mock draft coming to Atlanta out of Virginia.
I mean, it's kind of one of those. It's a little bit of a trend thing that I see. I always, because you saw it with like Tate Johnson. Sometimes I say if you're a 4-year starter or you're starting every minute or playing every minute as a freshman in a top program, a coach who's been around for a long time, they cannot deny you that that's saying something. Because we see a few center backs in this draft who have played like 7,500 minutes to 8,000 minutes. And, when you're the first, especially with like the type of talent that Virginia get, and outperforming an older, kind of more, he came in with a higher profile, but Sebastian Pop from Norway, the fact that an American freshman can be on that back line and win an ACC regular season title, it just kind of speaks to what type of prospect he could be.
The other one I wanted to ask you about, just because a little bit of the school we're talking about him coming from, you mentioned him, Junior Juve from Grand Canyon, a school you might not associate a whole lot with it. What's he like, and could he be somebody that fits what Atlanta needs?
I mean, it's been a full change. I don't think people really expected GCU to do well, but I mean, I think George Kiefer had something to prove coming into the team, because he got let go from NC State, went over to GCU. They had a phenomenal year, and they showed it even into the tournament. So, I mean, he's just, I think whenever you can get over double-digit goals in college, it's impressive with such a short season. And just, I don't know, taking the team and putting them on his back and leading them into the tournament for probably the first time in a little while.
I think one of my key caveats for DC United is that they're one of the few teams in MLS that doesn't have a twos team that that they're really all that interested in. So they are going to want a pro ready player, and I think Junior Diouf is one of those guys who could contribute early on. I think John is a guy who might need a little bit more time. Nick Simmons is a local kid from Richmond there, so he's got that connection. But them not bringing back Christian Benteke is a clear choice, and I'm curious if they are going to look for a similar profile in a 9 that they would bring in there.
I feel like you can do really well if you strategize here and you're building your roster. And a lot of times you're going to go spend on a 9 and totally get it. It's just the nature of the roster rules and the cap in Major League Soccer. But if you can back that up with a player out of either your academy or out of college who can be a low cost alternative, give you something different, be a reserve, somebody who can give you a spot start, that feels like the best use of cap space, and it can work really well. As we've talked about, I think just in terms of Atlanta from a strategy perspective, I think you'd probably be prioritizing a domestic player here at the number 2 spot, just because you don't want to have to use an international spot on a player out of the draft who those international spots you are probably going to go spend and expect to get a higher return on than a college player. So I think you can go domestic, and it seems like with the options, I mean, just taking a look at the mock draft that you guys did, you look domestically, you've got Aaron Price, you've got Simmons, you go a little bit further down, you've got De Bruyne, you've got Keenan Hott from Duke. You do have Ricky Lewis if you want to. I think it'd be a little bit of a gamble that high, but I would assume that you've seen a lot of him, and you've probably been able to, because of the proximity, you've probably been able to go and see him train.
Yeah,
And
and that might be an example of they're already going to get Collins Odoro back, who is a phenomenal player at Indiana.
Yeah.
But it's like kind of thinking about the future of if he were to go somewhere that's a more notable program. He is, last time I heard, he's in the transfer portal, so he'll go to a bigger program. But at least, again, you'll get his rights. He's played well for Lionsbridge over the summer, played well again this fall. Let's see him in a bigger program, and then reevaluate and see, because they do love their wingers. So
yeah,
that's just kind of the methodology behind that one.
Yeah. It's fascinating because of the strategy. I think that's where it gets so hard to predict. And I think it gets so hard, like club to club, to predict. We've all probably seen draft day a few times and see how that goes, and we know how it will go in the NFL, and you get surprises. But here, you literally can, with that high of a pick, you can sit there and say, I want somebody now. I could trade back and get a couple of picks later in the first round, and maybe even get a player who comes back and helps me, who's on a roster currently. You could go get allocation money. You could go get roster designations like an international slot, or you could take somebody that you don't want this year. You want him next year after another year in school. So it feels so unpredictable. Like, I couldn't even imagine sitting there trying to predict as a chief soccer officer, like, all right, what is DC going to do in front of me? What does that mean for me?
Well, and that's like one of the biggest points that I do want to bring up, because I'm not sure if I've ever said it before, but that's one of the things that, hearing from some of my friends who are MLS scouts, it's the draft is crazy on draft day back when, So basically, you have each team has their list of realistic guys that they really want to draft. They vetted them, they like them. Some guys that are third on their list will somehow end up in the third round, and they're like, holy crap, this is awesome. We got our third best guy in the third round, just because you have no idea what anyone else is going to do or who they're really targeting. We even see where teams want to move up and make sure they get their guy, because I've seen teams trade up and pick somebody that you're like, really? They traded up for him, but they're in love with him. That's great. But there's just no single methodology of how these guys end up on the teams that they do. So it'll be interesting to see who they end up with, because there's a ton of options, I think.
If I remember correctly, I think Aiden McFadden was one of those kind of players for Atlanta. I think they liked him, and if I remember the story correctly, and I think we're past the statute of limitations, so I can share it. I think they were thinking about trading up for him, but they ended up not having to, and they got him. Like, they thought they were going to have to get him trading up, I think, into the second rounds. I think he was a third-round pick, if I remember right. And he's one of those attackers converted into a defender who, I mean, he got minutes in MLS for you here. For a third-round pick, you take that in a heartbeat, if they can contribute at all at the
And they
first-team
were pretty
level.
good minutes. They were very
Yeah.
underrated minutes.
He was a very solid player. Like,
Yeah,
I think
he's with Louisville City now.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who, he'd be on the back end of an MLS roster, but he can be a best 11 guy in USL Championship. And you have to decide what you want and where you want to be. And, do you want to be on a bigger club and play less, or do you want to be at a smaller club and play more? And I think it's really worked out for him. But I think that's the other element of this that we're starting to see more and more out of SuperDraft is players you see in college in one position becoming something else at the MLS level. So it makes it even harder to project where they fit and what they're going to be.
So McFadden is one of the most fun player interviews I've ever gotten to be a part of.
Always a great chat.
Yeah, but that draft
Very quotable
chat was hilarious because I don't think he knew that he was in the draft. And so when
that does not surprise me at all.
That sounds about right.
Us hopping on a Zoom, there were a handful of us on that Zoom call with him. He was in the basement of whatever his college house was.
Yeah, I remember that.
He was just as delighted as all of us were that he was going to be going to Atlanta because, I think he even admitted at one point, like, I didn't even know I could be drafted this year. So, man, but no, that's one of the beautiful things about the draft is just that craziness.
I think the other element with Atlanta to remember is they've had some bad luck with draft picks as well. You had 2 devastating knee injuries. I think it was back-to-back years, or there might have been a year in between. You mentioned Russo, who attacker converting to defender, another Notre Dame guy, attacker converting to defender. We produce fullbacks and we draft Notre Dame attackers and turn them into fullbacks. That's what Atlanta United does.
So Jack Flanagan's on the radar.
Oh, well, see, there you go. Because we did it with John Gallagher. We did it with
Julian,
with Russo. No, he was Providence. Gressel was a Providence guy.
Yeah, that's true.
It was Gallagher, it was Russo, and it was McFadden. Those are the 3 Notre Dame guys that we've drafted that played a different position in college. The other one that we had bad luck with was Tyler Young, a Campbell guy, who another attacker converting to fullback, started really well for the Twos, was really starting to put it together, and had I think a career-ending knee injury, and he stayed in the Atlanta area, but couldn't get back to the professional level. He only played a handful of games for the Twos. Those are 2 guys in Russo and Young that could be back-end first-team guys right now at depth at fullback.
Yeah, and so on that note too, since he'll be playing tonight, but Joe Dale from Washington, I think he's a very solid player, but he's one of those guys who can play center midfield, box to box. He's been on the right wing, and he's also a right back, and I'm pretty sure he can play both sides. So it's like, you're looking for one of those guys who's probably, because again, for that, like, that's the Christian Roldan type stuff.
Yep.
Where having a guy who on the highest end, it's like Joshua Kimmich, who can play right back and center mid depending on what like your opponent is. Having that versatility, and I've heard MLS staff say versatile players are phenomenal to have, especially when you don't want to, maybe for a backup type player, you don't want to be spending money on 2 backups when you can have one that can back up either player.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about it on a game day roster when you start to nail it down, and you're like, all right, I've got this guy who can cover 3 different positions for me if needed and do a serviceable job. I'd love to have that player. If they're tactically intelligent enough to be able to contribute in 2 or 3 different positions, I want that player out of this draft, because and maybe not with the first pick, maybe not the first round pick, because I want somebody who I think can be to some degree impactful for you with that number 2 pick. And I really keep going back to the number 9 position because I just feel like that's where you're going to be able to get the most out of it and serve a need. And I think just the way that your roster is right now, you did bring Togashi and you did bring TRA back. I don't expect both of them to be back another year. So if Simmons is there, I would love to see Simmons because I feel like he fits everything you want, and he might get more games with the twos, and that's, I think, okay for a year. But then when you look second round and third round, especially, I'll take a smart player. I'll take a smart player who's played a lot of minutes and I feel like can help the back end of my first team roster, but can definitely be a leader and captain level player for my second team.
To bring it maybe to people who are listening to this kind of stuff for the first time, but from an Atlanta perspective, you want a Ronald Hernandez type guy.
Yeah.
You want that guy who...
Well, you want a Javier Armas. I mean, like,
for sure.
You want Javi. I mean, Javi would organize the cookouts for the team. He did a lot of the things that you had to do because he was a 24-year-old guy coming out of college who had been in Santander's system. So he knew what it took to be a professional. Physically, he's gonna have limitations, and that's this balancing act of when you look at what you can get out of the draft. You do have to prioritize if you're wanting somebody to contribute to your first team. I think you do have to prioritize a certain level of physical ability, whether that's power, whether that's pace, whether that's stamina. Like there's going to be elements of that you're going to have players who are good enough to play in college and be very good, but not good enough at the professional level because they can't run fast enough. They can't keep up. They're not strong enough. There's different spots, different positions get prioritized. But there's some of those guys that in a third round pick, they can end up being very valuable for your club because I don't think Cooper Sanchez is what he is now if he doesn't play alongside Javier Armas for a little while. Other players have been in that spot as well that Javi has helped and mentored, and that doesn't show up on a stat sheet, but can be as impactful as you might get out of a third round player on a stat sheet.
Mark, Gray, Jason, is there anything else that y'all want to just final thoughts to wrap it up?
I'm just looking forward to seeing the game continue to grow, the college game especially. I think it's the fact that we've went so many different directions on what you could do at the top end of the draft tells you that there's a lot of good players in college soccer. And I think there is going to be an evolution to what it looks like. I don't know if it'll look the same in 5 years, but I think it can be even more impactful as a player development tool in some ways than it is right now. I think there's a lot of potential in the college game. And I just always tell everybody every fall, if you've got a program near you, and this goes further down the pyramid too. I mean, we've seen pro players come out of D2 and pro players come out of D3, and Patrick Ajiman is a prime example of a guy who wasn't going to make it and went D3 and got noticed, and now he's in England. It happens. I've seen it firsthand with the level of talent that comes out of an Emory or an Oglethorpe here locally. Go support your local college programs. You know, if you have kids and you're trying to get them exposed to the game at higher levels, the college game is a great entry point for them to see, and you'll get to see guys up close. It's usually really good environments in these places to see these games. So the college game is a really valuable part of soccer in this country. And I hope that this is a draft that we look back at and we're like, man, this is a really valuable tool for teams to get better.
I think as college soccer grows, and I've been really pleased with how much it's grown just in the past 5 years, and I feel like it's accelerated so much. But for anybody that wants the game of soccer to grow in the United States, you should be wanting college soccer to grow exponentially, because it is a very unique pipeline for the United States, and it is one that needs to be tapped into more than it already has been. And as it grows, the entire United States soccer pyramid will grow. And that's what you should be hoping for.
Yeah, and I would say that the college game here in USL League 2 and MPSL in the summers, obviously we don't have the non-league football like England has, but it's like some of these main countries, so we'll just use England as an example. So inevitably academy guys are going to get old enough to have to find something to do for the next 2 or 3 years. And since we don't have non-league for the most part, I guess you can kind of call USL League 2, but just as being semi-pro or amateur. But it's like the structure that we have with the facilities, the travel, the accessibility being on ESPN Plus and all these different networks like Big Ten Plus. It's like, I think hopefully Americans who are big soccer fans should hopefully start to realize that we have some of the best U23 leagues in the world. So yeah, to double down on Jason, especially like going to these campuses, it's a fun time. Especially if you have kids, because the players themselves, they're really accessible. Like you could talk to them after games, get autographs. It's pretty, and then you never know who down the road is a MLS first teamer. But yeah, a lot of great just people in general throughout the level. So yeah, I agree. Everyone should probably try to go to at least like one of their college games just to see what it's like.
I'd do a lot for a 2016 Miles Robinson autograph right about now.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, Jason, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your knowledge with us and our followers here, and for all of the work that you do to help grow the game in this country and advocate for players. We need people like you to continue doing this important work, and I hope that conversations like what we've had today can help our viewers, help our readers be able to join in supporting these young players as they undergo this journey, as they're trying to chase their dreams. And so I find that to be one of the greatest joys of covering the development path of this team is being able to see a young guy who's been working hard be able to step out on the field of Ben's for the first time and be able to celebrate that with them. So I really appreciate what you two do to help connect fans with these young players so that we can adequately celebrate them when their moment comes.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, really appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Stage 2 of the reentry draft is Wednesday, so probably skip over that. The super draft is the day after on Thursday, so definitely be paying attention. All the things that we said, who knows if any of it will come to fruition because it is the super draft. But lots of good names out there. Definitely Atlanta in a great spot at the second overall pick. So it'll be very intriguing, and who knows how this one pans out into the next couple of years. But Mark, Jason, Gray, appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll definitely be doing this again. Thank y'all so much.
Sounds good. See you.